Hello, Red Lines. Me, Henry Keane, and our fellow YouTubers, Jonathan Silicon Curtain and Rick the Ukrainian. Hello, guys.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
Hello. So we have 4 topics to discuss. I suggest we invest 15 minutes on each. What do you say? I name the topics and we just start from that. Is that all right with you?
Of course.
Good. So
Sounds
first,
good to me.
yeah, Zelensky is in the United States to talk and to present victory plan. That's the first topic. Second one, Torapets and Tikhoretsk. I love the videos. And all Russian, there's what we call it, an attempt of flying for Samad missile, whatever that was. Then third topic, Iran presented new drones and the reaction of the West on it. And topic number 4, Russia and China. Do you believe they will take part in peace summit? So, a peace summit. I would rather start with Zelensky's visit. So there are so many victory plans around. Even China, I believe, has a victory plan for Ukraine. So if we're starting to implement, but most of these plans are actually about land concessions and concessions of sorts. So do you think that any victory plan, but Zelensky's victory plan is actually about Ukraine's victory? I think we lost Jonathan for a moment. Well, Rick, let's start with you, and hoping that Jonathan will come back.
Jonathan's here.
Jonathan's here.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, as for the peace plans, other than Zelensky, I would not call them victory plans, because for Ukraine, victory will be to at least have all the territories that we have from 1991. And if we sacrifice any of those territories, this is not a victory for us. And that means new war, new invasion in the future, in 5-10 years, whenever Russia is going to be ready to go in again from all directions.
Peace plan and the victory plan. But as far as I know, Zelensky actually is going to present exactly victory plan. So what is the difference? To you, what do you think? Rick said there's a big difference between peace plan and victory plan. I agree with that. I couldn't agree more. But maybe Jonathan can answer that question. Maybe.
Yes. I mean, I did a video about 2 years ago with a French intellectual called Nicolas Tenzer, and the title of that was "No Peace Without Victory." And I don't think there can be a peace without a return to Ukraine's sovereign borders. That potentially is a minimum, but there are many other conditions for victory, I think. Return of the tens of thousands of kidnapped or abducted children and Ukrainian citizens who've ended up in Russia. There are reparations and the admittance, of course, of Ukraine to international bodies. So not placing restrictions on which bodies and institutions Ukraine can become a part of, I think, is a critical part of any victory.
Well, we all agree on that, but that's, it sounds to me like a perfect picture, like utopian or so. So how do we make West actually acting that way? Because, I mean, now I feel like, it is kind of an excruciating hypocrisy. We're literally sitting on weapons that can help us and we're not allowed to use it. That's the example. So how do we make West actually accept our victory or peace plan, whatever that is, but to end the war on Ukrainian terms? Is there a way, or we just sit and wait?
I think there's one precondition for that, and that is to do what most Ukrainians are doing, and that's stop, fear Russia. I think one of the biggest challenges at the moment is whether you're in Washington or Berlin, it's a fear of Russian might, even though that's shown to be a paper tiger, fear of Russian collapse, and fear of Russian nuclear terrorism. These are the 3 big fears we have to overcome before the West will start to embrace any concept of a Ukrainian victory, unfortunately.
Do you agree, Rick?
I agree 100%. And unfortunately, we don't see the absence of that fear or disappearing of it in the West. So that worries us Ukrainians. And to be honest, we are becoming more cynical lately. I can speak for many conscious Ukrainians as I monitor the news here in Ukraine. So we are not hopeful for our partners this year after all that happened lately.
Well, it sounds to me and it looks to me, I've been here, you recently, Rick, asked me that question. I'm here for 2.5 years. So I certainly know what happened and I can see the progress. And I believe that Ukraine already crossed all the red lines for the West.
Yeah.
So maybe it is time to, we've even crossed some Kursk red lines. So, well, I say we because the Ukrainian army did. So maybe really start to thinking about victory. So, meeting with Biden, Harris, and Trump. In this, well, it is really maybe a unique situation where Ukraine have to be ready for almost anything, to be for whatever, whoever is going to win. Rick, who is going to win elections in the United States? Question to you. Yeah, go ahead.
That question is too bold.
Yeah, I know. Let's do it. Go for it, Rick.
That could be both of them, It could be anything. And
both.
In any case, no, not like two presidents at the same time.
Right, well, that would be
course.
interesting.
Any of them, okay. That's not my perfect English, I'm not a native speaker, so I can say things like this one. But if any of them wins, this is not going to be easy for US because the second candidate will definitely proclaim, in my opinion, a winner. They will proclaim them fraud, this election as a fraud or something like that. So
that always happens,
Yeah, so we don't know what happens, but I will speak for myself. I'm not hopeful for any candidate. We know that there are a lot of speculations about Trump, and basically he right now says that he doesn't want Ukraine to win. His answer to that question during the debates was, I want to for peace to come, for war to stop. Yes, war should stop. That's what he said.
Right.
Do you want Ukraine to win? I want this war to stop. Millions of people, you remember that, are dying every day. And, that man will probably stop supporting Ukraine. But Kamala Harris probably will continue the policy of the current office of the president, Biden's policy, which is just to give Ukraine enough not to crumble and lose this war immediately. And that's a big problem, and we don't see any bright future for us if any candidate wins.
Jonathan, any silicon
I'd love to say Rick is wrong. Yeah, I'd love to say Rick is wrong, but he's not. Last week I interviewed someone, lovely gentleman and a veteran who is close to the Harris team. And whereas with his military hat on, he said some sensible things, such as, it makes no military sense to restrict strikes on things like ammunition dumps, air bases, etc. With his political hat on, I got the impression that it's more of the same. There might be a little less caution, a little less fear of Russia and its messaging, but fundamentally, I think Rick is right. There will be no significant change. For as long as it takes will still be the mantra, but for as long as what takes will not be defined, and how long that is going to last will not be defined either. And without those two things being defined, there is no concept of victory. That's why I think it's interesting that Zelensky is presenting a so-called victory plan. My fear is that it may be too bold for the US establishment or politicians in Berlin or even NATO. They may find it a little too scary.
A little too scary. Well, I mean, they're already feared of escalations. I mean, they're all trying to appease the monster instead of actually slapping him in the face. But maybe Ukraine should overtake the initiative. We are like that, smoothly sliding to a second question. Toropetsk and Tikhoretsk, maybe we continue to do that. And maybe we continue to, engineer on new weapons like Palyanitsa and things like our own missiles. And maybe we just keep on showing the West that there are no red lines, because these red lines that exist in politicians' heads are actually consist of blood of Ukrainian soldiers, and not only Ukrainian soldiers on the front line. But I really doubt that, I'm saying these words, but nothing is going to change. And if nothing is going to change, Ukraine can change it for itself.
Yeah. And I actually
Being-
found optimism
Yeah.
lately in that we still have those restrictions on and not lifted. We right now are forced to develop technology faster, to do it bolder, to do the
Right.
attacks bolder, to develop our own ballistic missiles, our own cruise missiles. So it is actually I finally found optimism in that you see these restrictions, they will give us the boost, they will give us the
Yep.
opportunity to actually take the initiative with our own hands by ourselves.
And jumping in there, I think that's absolutely the case. I think Kursk has shown that
Yep.
Ukraine can change the dynamic, can change the narrative, can change the entire mood, not only of its civilian population, but its military population, by taking a little bite out of Russian territory. But in order to translate that into a victory, I think it will take two things. And this is perhaps where allies can help, because one of the things that the US has done, which I think we can actually congratulate them on, in the last sort of 6 months, they have started to enforce secondary sanctions. And many Chinese banks and companies have got much more timid than they were before about actually working with Russian institutions. Of course, Nabulina and others are putting a real spin on this, as usual. Propaganda is out there, the IMF helping to support it, suggesting the Russian economy is strong. I don't think it is. I think it's fragile and weak. If the US can actually tighten its hands around the neck of the Russian economy, that is something they can do without fearing, I think, repercussions. That's not a red line. They can do that. They can enforce that even tighter. The EU must do the same and prevent goods from traveling through Central Asia and so on, as they've turned a blind eye to that. If the US does that and Ukraine forces mobilization in Russia through operations like Kursk, then that will deal, I think, a double blow to the Russian economy. Unfortunately, I don't think Ukraine will win the war and get that comprehensive victory on the battlefield. What it will be able to do is to inflict pain, economic pain, on Russians to the point where they decide this is no longer worth it. And even though they live in a dictatorship, that dictator is constantly sounding their views, constantly trying to assess whether he still carries the population with him. So if that pain threshold can be reached, increased to such a point, and the economy is on collapse, which potentially threatens his regime, then I think we could see some change or even realistic negotiation.
Right. Well, tighten their hands on Russia's economy neck. I just love that. What do you think? Is Russia, I'll just go straight forward. Do you gentlemen think Russia is still nuclear capable because of that Samad was trying to fly and exploded in the shaft? And what happened? Because 6 of the 7 flights were unsuccessful recently, so maybe we're talking about Russia is not nuclear juggernaut, as it is just another paper tiger in terms of nuclear. Do you think that is the case, Rick?
Well, I don't know much about their nuclear program, but I know that they failed, definitely. They failed the launches of Sarmat.
Right. That's right.
Yes, but the problem is they still have those old nukes. Of course, it's not, they may not work. We don't know. and we can only speculate. But what I know
right.
is that they're constantly bluffing and using the nuclear blackmail only to threaten and to bully everyone around them, especially United States. And Biden, it seems for us Ukrainians, Biden fears those threats. Unfortunately, he is building up all the politics to not let Ukraine win completely on that. He's afraid of nuclear weapons being used by Russia, and I think it doesn't matter how effective their nuclear program is and how what potential it has. If they have nukes, that's enough to scare Biden and his administration,
Right.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and we also have to be careful anyway. We're just speculating here and talking. The three gentlemen sitting in the studio and said, "Is Russia nuclear capable? Who cares? They have nukes, and that's enough." But again, a question to you, Jonathan. Biden is fearing Russia's nukes or whatever. Do you think this is some sort of a plan, a political game, or is it really a fear, a superpower?
It's a genuine fear.
Really?
I think it's an absolutely genuine fear. And
Right.
what you also find is there are many analysts that directly feed into national security policy who are deeply, deeply engaged in Russian narratives. Now, I wouldn't want to call them all assets because I'm sure not all of them are. Many of them may genuinely believe this, but there are many, many voices that are chiming in and helping to sort of form that bubble or that impression
Right.
in the administration, who I think are deeply impressed by Russia's terroristic messages over the last couple of decades. One name which will be familiar to some of the people watching is Samuel Charap. And if you look at the kind of stuff that is written, it is unfortunately, it buys into the idea of Russia being eternal, invincible, the great bear, and all this kind of stuff. And it's put into intellectual language, it's put into an intellectual framework. But unfortunately, that stuff gets through. They will also have many, I would say, assets embedded within academia and the media. Me and colleagues are constantly trying to sort of unpick who they are and parse their messages and try to deconstruct them to challenge this fear. But unfortunately, there are many of them. There are also many grifters and journalists who just love hyping this stuff up,
Yeah,
because it helps
right,
them to create a name, and it's an intellectual grift, and it's very widespread. On the nuclear stuff, I mean, all it takes is one missile out of 10 to get through, and that is already devastating. So I don't think we can. I think there's speculation about whether those things work or not. Even if some of them drop down onto Russia's own territory, they don't really care too much.
Absolutely.
But it's devastating enough. I don't know if I should say this here, but the best man at my wedding actually served in the Russian armed forces in Kazakhstan at an airbase where these missiles were in the 1980s. And he told me stories about how they would scrape off the gold and platinum from the circuits and sell it for vodka. We know that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I know that
I'm
kind
sure
of stuff
that still
because
goes
I
on.
was buying actually non-ferrous scrap for a British company for 4 years from Kazakhstan, and maybe that not that nuclear gold, but anyway, we've bought a lot, so I know it was a mess. It always is a mess. But maybe this is because it's even more dangerous, because you're dealing with if there is no Putin, we're dealing with the bunch of warlords with nukes in their hands, which is. But
Well, that's the other thing worth mentioning is collapse. I mean, I think even more than nuclear terrorism, I think many people in Washington and Berlin fear a so-called Russian collapse. Whether that is founded or not really depends on your interpretation of Russian history at this point.
Well, Rick, do you think if Russia will just fall apart, and do you think that these all warlords in nuclear, do you think this is not these great fears of West are somewhat grounded? Any grounds on that?
Absolutely not. And guys, the thing is, in my opinion, right now, Ukrainian goal and Ukrainian vision of our victory is completely opposite of US's vision of of the future that they want.
Right.
We want Russia to collapse because for us Ukrainians, this is the only way to not be invaded once again, because Russia is still an empire. It consists of 89 oblasts, and almost every oblast could be, is populated by its own people, its own nation. So if Russia collapses, it won't be able to threaten us again and invade Ukraine once again, because it's not just Putin, it's not just their current propaganda. It's been there for centuries, And on the other hand, Biden's administration right now is making friends with Navalny, and Navalny just a few weeks ago openly said that no, like they could speak of no decolonization of Russia, of no collapse of Russian Empire, because why would that should happen? Because those peoples are so close to each other. They're basically one people, those
One
narratives.
nation,
She absolutely repeats the imperialistic Putin's narratives. Russian
that is, yeah,
so-called
yeah, I've heard that.
opposition
I've heard that.
is, yes, it is obviously it has the same agenda as Putin. So what US currently wants is to preserve that Russian empire, and that's a big problem for us, because I think, unfortunately, coming back to the previous topic, Zelensky's plan, in my opinion, is doomed, unfortunately, because that goal of US, and it will remain the same if Kamala Harris wins. We don't know what will happen if Trump wins, but if Kamala wins, the agenda will stay the same. The plan will stay the same to preserve the Russian Empire, because that decolonized Russia, Russia that will disintegrate, may be too dangerous for US. So US needs to preserve that. By that, there should be no win plan for Ukraine, because if Ukraine wins and restores all the territorial integrity, Russia, with only a small percentage, will remain an empire, because it always depended on invasions and success of, occupation of territories of others.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I can't agree more, actually. I don't see any problem with disintegrated Russia, and a big problem for the United States. It can be a problem for Ukraine again, but it's easy to deal with that kind of Russia than as a sort of a Soviet empire, because Russia is a Soviet empire right now. It's
exactly
a prolongation of it. Do you agree with that, Jonathan? Then modern Russia is just a Soviet empire with more or less modern Putin driving Mercedes.
I've held this view for some time. And in fact, the Soviet Union was a continuation of the Russian imperial project. And they just found an ideology that allowed them to pull the wool over people's eyes for another 70 years. I mean, Rick and I have spoken before, but Rick will also know that my opinions on this are not necessarily representative of the majority of Westerners. I think this is far worse in some ways even than Rick outlines here. You'll remember after COVID, when they had, certainly in the US and the UK, many companies were paid to just carry on going, even though those companies were no longer economically viable. They were called zombie companies. And eventually, when the COVID payments stopped, they allowed some of them to go to the wall, because you can't have a healthy economy if you have zombie companies, and a large number of them. Yeah. Well, Russia is a zombie country, and the US is artificially keeping it alive. And my argument is you cannot have a healthy international order when you have a country the size of Russia that contains so many entities that could be, loosely fragmented states in their own right. You cannot have a healthy international order with a giant zombie country, which Russia is.
Nobody's trying to.
But the US is determined.
Right. Well, you do. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I mean, the US is determined to prevent it from collapsing. That's exactly their strategy.
I mean. Gentlemen, let's go back in our minds for 3 years ago and listen to those experts who were saying that there's going to be no war. No way. Putin he's bad but not mad. He will not go. Here we are. So Russia might collapse without any permission or any expert vision of that collapsing or not. It will happen. I believe it will, because someone is citing the Hans the Western hands on the economy, and economies thrown, or for some other reasons, or maybe just a new normal for the Kremlin these days is just, of course, it is not a big oblast. It's okay. All right. Well, what about Moscow Oblast? It's not too far away for Ukrainians anymore, at least. So Ukrainians, what I mean is that Ukrainians slowly, with very hard, they spill blood. Well, that they pay in blood, but they go further in terms of policies, any policies, economically, politically, militarily. Ukraine is going further, Russia is going down. Of course, Russia is enormous country. It will take years, but it is happening. Am I right, or am I just, too patriotic?
Well, you're optimistic, I may say, and
Right. Okay.
I
Someone has to
actually
be.
will join you in this. I hear too many stories from the front line, from the tired soldiers who just want sometimes they want for all of this to end, or at least to take a pause, for them to
True.
prepare to go to get the rest. But I can see that we have the saying here in Ukraine. Probably I don't know if it's international. We say Russia is a colossus on the clay legs. Do you
On the
say the
feet of
same?
clay.
On the feet of clay. Okay.
Right.
So basically, we did not expect Prigozhin to do the coup, and I still think it was not staged, because it was too realistic, and it may
At least
happen
he's
just like
desperate.
that. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, well.
to stage that was way too realistic for him, I would say. Well, you're right. I'm reading. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Yeah. Go
No
on,
problem.
please.
No problem. I just wanted to say that it may happen at any second, and Russia may indeed fall apart with the blink of an eye. And I don't think that Putin's death may necessarily
Yep.
cause the Russia fall apart, because it's not just him. There's a whole team behind him,
Absolutely.
and not just numbers. There are hundreds of thousands of people in their structures, governmental structures, military structures, and most importantly, law enforcement, as they call it. But that's basically a great torture machine that is just torturing both their own citizens, like mostly because just statistically the number of their own citizens is bigger than number of Ukrainian citizens who they captured. Like our soldiers or our civilians, they don't care who to capture. They see a person, and if that person is not following the Russian agenda, then that person should go into prison, and then that huge torture machine, will torture those people. As you maybe know, Henry, I translate and dub into English the interviews with prisoners of war that Zolkin
Right.
does, and
Right.
Karpenko. And that torture machine, I watched at least 700 of them, and that torture machine is everywhere in Russia, and the it's just not easy to defeat it. But it will not defeat. It will defend itself even after Putin is gone. That machine will keep living until we break it apart.
Well, someone has to. I mean, exactly. I mean, again, I agree, but I'm also, I was recently filming on the very front line. So I've been there. I've been near Borova with the Kharkiv, and we've spent a couple of nights right there in Posadki, and we've testing new Ukrainian drone Vampire, which is working extremely well. Babi God does its job, I can tell you that. And people talk. People are frightened, sometimes not frightened, but really, really wary and tired because they want to go home. And they have to, find ways to see their wives for at least 2 weeks, so their wives coming to them. So that much that I can tell. So, but anyway, Ukraine is here. Who would ever expect that 2.5 years ago? Who would ever expect West gave us only 10 F-16s, which is not really enough. No, it's not even a small amount of F-16s. But anyway, some weaponry, with some money, with what we have, I mean Ukraine, I'm sorry, captured the parts of Russian territory. Whoever did that for the last 100 years?
Yeah, and just wanted to add to the topic of capturing Russian territory. I think any assault actions, any offensive, can be successful these days by effect of suddenness.
Surprise.
So surprise, yeah. That's the only way because we've seen that in 2023 when Ukraine tried to do a counteroffensive, talking about that for at least I don't know 8 months everywhere in all the news, and that's become a failure unfortunately. But when we don't speak about it, it becomes successful like Kursk operation, and it's going to be much harder to reach that effect of surprise in the future because Russians see that it happened in
Oh,
Kursk
come on.
Oblast. They will
You
reinforce.
Ukrainians, you guys will figure out something new. I trust in you. If that would be not Kursk, maybe you go to Siberia. Recently returned from Antarctica. Really, seriously, I was filming.
Anything.
Yeah,
Well,
anything that will happen. That I can
You're right.
guarantee, Comrade Putin. If you're watching Red Lines, something will happen. Expect on Torapets, whatever. All of a sudden, your people smoke in wrong places. After all, Jesus Christ, Jonathan. A question to you. We've been, talking with Rick, but a question to you. Iran presented new drones and West reacts. How exactly?
I mean, this is another area of disappointment. In fact, there are so many areas. I mean, you mentioned the Antarctic, but also, Wagner PMC has been taking over huge chunks of, the Sahel, central regions of Africa, raping those countries of resources and minerals to
Right.
fund its aggression in Russia. And what's happened? I mean, the West has simply departed, let them get on with it. So I don't expect too much when it comes to Iran either, unfortunately. We've ceded control of areas to Russia. We've ceded to their brutality and their willingness to inflict violence. We've sort of flinched away from it. For Russia and for Putin, he, of course, doesn't care how many people he expends. If he feels that we are on the retreat,
People.
then that is just a red rag to a bull. If we respond to his aggression with words, then that is also that is simply going to fire him into further aggression. So
Exactly.
I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how Putin works and how this axis of intolerance, the states that are supporting Russia's war, work. They're not full allies because, of course, they have their own disputes. They have their own areas of special interest which don't necessarily converge. But we are allowing them to collaborate in more and more areas without putting up any
Why?
kind of resistance.
Why?
I don't
Is
know
it
where that
money?
ends, unfortunately.
Money, isn't it? Influence, power.
It's not just money. I think it's a failure of will. It is a
Right.
failure of will. It's a failure of leadership. Our leaders at the moment are not leaders; they're managers, and that's why these messages of caution and timidity really strike a chord with them, because
Right.
it's like, they're looking for an excuse not to take action, and they will find plenty of excuses. Whereas a leader will not necessarily need a pile of evidence in order to
Exactly.
do something. They will essentially just get on with it. But we do not have any people like that. We have
Well,
no
we have.
Churchills.
We have in Ukraine. I'm sure Rick can find a couple of nice presidents of the United States in Ukraine. Very decisive. You can.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. See?
Serhiy Sternenko could be a great president of US, guys. He would lead this world to peace and prosperity.
Yeah. Well, first we'll have to, Jonathan. Can you say Sergei Sternenko? Pronounce his name.
Sergei Sternenko.
Not bad.
Well done.
That's a first step, at least. Yeah. Well, right. Okay. So, gentlemen, Russia and China on second peace summit. Do you believe in that?
Russia, yes. I think they will agree. Yeah. They
you
will
think
agree.
that's
They
it?
will
So,
say we disagree until the last day, and then they'll say, "Oh, we decided to
right.
send a representative," or
Okay.
not even comment on that. Just just like they do. Whatever Russia says right now doesn't matter. Russia lies in their every statement and every sentence that comes out of their mouth. But as for China, I'm not sure. I think China will still abstain of that, and. That's my opinion. It's not based on anything. It's just my feeling.
All right. Okay. Well, so Russia is a mill of lies, producing it on industrial scale, as my dear friend Cormac Smith says. Um, Jonathan, do you believe that Russia and China will attend second peace summit? Or maybe we should. You know what we can do? We can actually make a peace summit gathered in The Hague. So in case they, are not going, are not falling for what we are offering, we can just leave them in The Hague anyway. So.
I mean, that will limit the number of people that Russia can send because anyone with any authority is going to be indicted. No, I think China may not go for one reason, in that if it goes, it might feel it has to commit to something concrete, and that is always going to be a risk. Russia will send someone, of course they will, because it's another excuse to rub salt in the wound. They can send one of their clowns who can send subtle messages insulting Ukrainians and insulting Ukrainian victims. And this is a great opportunity for their propaganda machine to create
Exactly.
the kind of evil that they delight in. And I'll put it simply: if people haven't, if they don't understand in the original, if they
right.
can't watch the propagandists,
Hmm.
they don't understand, I think, the mindset, which is vicious, absolutely vicious. And what's the Russian word? Mstительny, vengeful.
Vengeful. Right. And you said it in Russian almost perfectly. Of Jonathan, how many languages do you speak?
Yeah, only Russian and English.
All right. Okay. So, may I disagree with you just a little bit? Because, well, of course, they will try to. Well, I think they're, in some sort of very literal sense, pushed against the wall, and they cannot really, be. This is a peace summit. So if they are there, they would have to somehow at least try to negotiate for some sort of a peace. Is that right? Because all the other things, I'm just not in the agenda, not on the agenda. And what do you do? Who do you send?
I'm not
Lavrov?
sure. I mean, if you see the representative in the UN, they're very good at defecating on international
Right.
institutions in the full glare of the world's media. They're adept at that.
All right, well, we'll see. Anyway, I would love to see Russia on the peace summit and to see what happens. Anyway, would you like Russia to visit it? Do you think that we can at least get ready for that and give them a proper answer? I mean, Ukraine again.
Is it for whom that question is?
Well, I'm asking it. If God is not going to answer it now, Rick, can you take his place?
Okay. Well, Russia just unfortunately has a stronger position in negotiations than Ukraine at the moment. They unfortunately have more success on the battlefield for the last almost a year already.
Right.
And course cooperation may be a good thing, and maybe only like eye-opening, right, for the world. Let's hope it is, because maybe our partners will open their eyes, but it may be only like this, like just a tiny bit. We will see after this visit of Zelensky in a few weeks if Russian territory will be struck by British and US missiles, also maybe by scalps, the French ones. Then yes, course cooperation changed something. Then we may say that. You know what my concern is? Zelensky bringing the peace plan right now to Biden, Kamala Harris, and Trump. He is planning to show it to all of them, and I really hope that he won't be doing it in details because there are so many spies there, and given any information about our operations to our partners is a potential risk, and 2023 showed it perfectly that it's a potential risk of the information leak, and as a result, this peace plan will definitely go down and won't be successful because Russians will know everything beforehand, and we have no chance. So I really hope Zelensky won't be going into details what operation on Russian territory is going to happen next, and what how our partners can sabotage it, because definitely Biden is not interested in that operation to be successful, because it brings the Russian disintegration closer. You see.
Yeah, I see.
So how I lately describe the actions of our partners is sabotage. Unfortunately, the slow supply of ammunition, then pause for 9 months in supplies, that even 12 guys. Zelensky said it in one of his interviews that it took 12 months to supply us with weapons that we needed. That pause, then all these restrictions, all of this, unfortunately, smells like sabotage because don't um, we don't have the same goal anymore. We
Yeah.
need for Russia to fall apart. U.S. don't.
Yeah, so maybe the West does not is not planning for Russia to fail, but who cares? Again, so Ukraine must have its own plans, and we're just going forward with that with what we have. And yes, we say thank you. We say thank you, the Great West, for the help. And Jonathan, thank you for joining Redlines. Rick, thank you so very much. Jonathan, Silicon Curtain. Well, by the way, why Silicon Curtain? What is that?
It's like the Iron Curtain, but it means that Russian BS is in your device wherever you are, and that was the idea behind it.
Right, well, that's good. Well, Rick the Ukrainian, no questions about that. Me, Henry Keenan, Red Lines. So thank you so very much, gentlemen, for speculating on these Red Lines themes with me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.